There are moments in life when the weight on your shoulders feels far heavier than anything you were ever meant to carry. You try to fix everything yourself. You fight battles that drain your strength. You chase answers that only leave you more confused. In those moments, you are invited to step back and let God take his rightful place. When you surrender, the impossible God begins to move in ways you never imagined. This is the moment when your faith is refined and your trust becomes real. This message calls you to stop holding what is breaking you and let God handle what only he can restore. When you reach the point where your strength is no longer enough, you begin to understand what trust really means. Trust begins when your own ability ends. You look at the situation and you cannot see a solution, yet something inside whispers that God is still working. This is where faith rises. This is where you stop chasing answers with your own power and start believing that the unseen hand of God is already shaping your path. In this silence, God builds a foundation that cannot be shaken. There are seasons when God does not speak immediately, and that silence feels heavy. You wonder if he has forgotten you or if your prayers have disappeared into the air. But silence is not abandonment. Silence is preparation. It is the place where God strengthens your heart so you can stand firm when his plan finally unfolds. Trust is built when you wait without collapsing and believe without panic. In those quiet moments, God is opening doors that you cannot yet see. When you stop trying to force outcomes, you allow God to write a better story than the one you were trying to control. Your panic creates confusion, but his presence creates calm. Your rush leads to mistakes, but his timing leads to purpose. Trust is not sitting still in fear. Trust is standing with confidence, knowing that God is moving even when you cannot trace his steps. Every delay has a reason, every struggle has a lesson, every prayer has an answer waiting on the other side. You learn real trust when you surrender the battles you were never meant to fight alone. You realize that your strength is too small, but God's strength knows no limits. You begin to breathe again when you place everything in his hands and say with conviction that you believe he will do what you cannot. In that surrender, fear loses its grip. In that surrender, peace enters your spirit. In that surrender, God becomes greater in your life than the storm around you. Trust grows when you stop demanding immediate change and start believing in divine timing. You do not see the whole picture, but God does. You do not understand every reason, but God does. You simply walk by faith, knowing that he is guiding every step toward the outcome that will shape your character, strengthen your spirit, and reveal his glory in your life. Let God work and let your heart rest, because he has never failed and he will not start now. When you finally understand that your strength was never designed to carry every burden, you begin to see the beauty of surrender. You spend so much time trying to stand tall for everyone around you, while quietly collapsing inside. You push through pain because you believe breaking is not an option. Yet God waits for the moment when you admit that you cannot continue alone. Your weakness is not a failure, but an invitation to experience his power. When you release the weight, you begin to rise again. There are battles that overwhelm you not because you are weak, but because they were never meant to rest on your shoulders. God allows certain pressures to remind you that you are human and he is God. You were created to trust him, not to exhaust yourself trying to fix everything. When you lay down your fear, your heart becomes open to his peace. When you release control, your spirit becomes free to breathe again. This is where strength is restored and hope is renewed. The moment you give your struggles to God, something inside you shifts. Your mind becomes calmer because you are no longer fighting alone. Your heart becomes lighter because the weight is now carried by the Almighty. You stop running in circles and start walking in faith. You stop drowning in stress and start resting in His presence. Surrender becomes the doorway to a deeper, unshakable peace. God does not ask you to pretend you are strong. He asks you to trust His strength more than your fear. He asks you to believe that He can lift what you cannot even touch. He asks you to understand that His peace is greater than your storm. When you let go, you discover that God was holding you from the beginning. Let Him carry what is too heavy for you and watch your life change. Letting God handle your battles is not a sign that you have given up. It is a sign that you finally understand where real power comes from. You may have spent years fighting in your own strength only to end up exhausted and wounded. But the moment you place your battles in the hands of God, you step into a different kind of victory. A victory that does not depend on your ability, but on His authority. This is where faith becomes stronger than fear. Many people think surrender is weakness, but surrender to God is the greatest form of strength. It takes courage to admit that you cannot control everything. It takes faith to believe that God's plan is wiser than your own plans. It takes humility to say that you trust His timing more than your pressure. When you release the fight, you discover that He was already preparing the path. He was already moving pieces you never noticed. When God fights for you, the outcome is always different from what you imagined. He does not just remove the problem, He transforms you through it. He teaches you to stand with confidence even when the storm keeps raging. He teaches you to pray with conviction instead of panic. He teaches you to see victory from His perspective rather than your emotions. Letting Him lead is what turns battles into breakthroughs. You begin to learn that faith is not proven when life is easy. Faith is proven when you trust God in the very place where you feel weakest. When you choose to stand still and let Him work, you step into a peace that no attack can destroy. You realize that God has never lost a battle, and He will not lose the one you are facing now. You realize that your role is to trust, and His role is to deliver. This shift changes everything inside you. When you give God the battle, you also give Him the outcome. You stop fearing every possibility because His decision becomes your confidence. You stop panicking about tomorrow because His wisdom becomes your stability. You stop fighting alone because His presence becomes your strength. Letting God handle it is the moment you finally rise above what was trying to break you. And this is where real victory begins. In the end, the message is simple yet life-changing. You were never created to carry every burden or fight every battle alone. Real strength begins the moment you let God step into the places where you feel tired, broken, or unsure. When you release control, you make room for His power, His wisdom, and His perfect timing. Trusting Him does not make you weak, it makes you unshakable. Let God handle what you cannot and walk forward with a peaceful heart, knowing He will never fail you.